The stars looked different through the observation window of the horizon's edge. Captain Daniel Morris stood alone in the dim light, watching the swirling colors of the nebula ahead. After 3 months of travel, his ship was about to make history. Humanity was about to meet its first alien civilization. Daniel was 52 years old and had spent most of his life in space. He had been a Navy officer before joining the exploration program. Now he commanded 200 people on a ship designed for one purpose: finding intelligent life among the stars. The quantum slip drive had made this possible. Humanity could finally travel faster than light, and they had chosen Daniel to lead the first real contact mission. Behind him, the door opened. Commander Lisa Harper walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was younger than Daniel by 15 years, but already his most trusted officer. She handed him a cup and stood beside him at the window. "We got a response," she said quietly. "They agreed to meet us at the coordinates they provided. Should arrive in 6 hours." Daniel nodded slowly. "How is the crew?" "Nervous, excited, scared, all of it at once." Lisa smiled a little. "Dr. Zhao has been running through every possible greeting ritual he can think of. Ambassador Vale is rehearsing his speech for the 10th time. And you? I just want to make sure we do not mess this up," she said. 6 hours later, the horizon's edge dropped out of slip space near a massive vessel. The alien ship was twice their size, built with smooth curves and glowing panels. It looked more like a work of art than a military craft. Daniel stood on the bridge with his senior officers around him. "They are hailing us," said the communications officer. "On screen," Daniel ordered. The view screen flickered to life. An alien face appeared. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, silver skin that seemed to shift colors, and a mouth that moved in ways that looked wrong to human eyes. But the translation software worked, and a voice came through clearly. "I am Commander Veth of the Vorath Patrol Fleet. You are the ones from Earth?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "I am Captain Daniel Morris. We come in peace and friendship." There was a pause. Then Veth made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are real. We had reports of Earth 800 years ago, but they said you were still using primitive tools. Now you have faster-than-light travel. This is remarkable." "We have been working hard," Daniel said carefully. "We would like to establish formal contact with your civilization." "That will be arranged. I am instructed to escort you to Congregation Station 12. The Council will want to meet you. Follow our ship." The journey to the station took 3 days. During that time, Dr. Kevin Zhao worked constantly with the Vorath to improve the translation systems. Kevin was a thin man with quick hands and an even quicker mind. He had spent his career studying how different cultures communicate, and now he was doing it with actual aliens. "They are polite but distant," Kevin told Daniel during a briefing. "They keep asking how we developed slip drive technology so quickly. I think they are confused about us." "Confused how?" Ambassador Gregory Vale asked. Vale was a politician more than a diplomat, but he had been Earth's choice for this mission. He was ambitious and sometimes too eager to make impressions. "Most species take thousands of years to go from basic industry to space travel," Kevin explained. "We did it in less than 300 years. They think that is strange." Congregation Station 12 was beyond anything humanity had built. It was a city in space orbiting a neutron star. Thousands of ships docked at its ports. The structure itself stretched for miles, covered in lights and symbols from civilizations Daniel could not even imagine. The humans were given quarters and told to prepare for a formal meeting. Daniel chose a small team: Lisa, Kevin, Ambassador Vale, and Chief Engineer Nicole Grant. Nicole was there because she understood how things worked, both machines and people. If there were practical questions, she could answer them. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species sat in tiered seating that rose toward a domed ceiling. Some were huge, some were tiny. Some breathed oxygen, others were in sealed environment suits. The variety was overwhelming. A being that looked like a floating jellyfish spoke first. Its voice was translated into perfect English. "Welcome, humans of Earth. We are the Galactic Congregation, representatives of 3,000 species across the galaxy. We have reviewed your initial reports and find them acceptable. You may present your formal request for membership." Ambassador Vale stepped forward and began his prepared speech. He talked about humanity's values, their desire for peace, and their hope to join the galactic community. It was a good speech, Daniel thought. But he noticed something strange. Many of the aliens were not really listening. Some were reading documents. Others were having quiet conversations. It was like they had heard this all before and found it boring. When Vale finished, there was a brief silence. Then the jellyfish being spoke again. Your application is accepted. You will be granted provisional membership with standard restrictions. Your territory will be limited to your current system and immediate neighboring space. You may establish trade relations and embassies. A full membership review will occur in 50 years. Are these terms acceptable? Yes, Vale said quickly. Too quickly, Daniel thought. Then it is done. Welcome to the congregation. Next applicant, please. That was it. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization lasted less than an hour. As they left the chamber, Daniel felt disappointed. He had expected more ceremony, more significance. Instead, it felt like filling out paperwork at a government office. Over the next few weeks, the human delegation learned more about the congregation. They attended receptions, toured facilities, and met with various species representatives. Kevin was fascinated. Lisa was taking notes constantly. Nicole spent time with alien engineers comparing technologies. Ambassador Vale was making contacts and trying to secure trade deals. But Daniel noticed patterns. The congregation was old, very old. Most species had been members for thousands of years. They had territories, resources, and established relationships. New members like humanity were given small roles and expected to wait their turn for everything. Nothing happened quickly. Every decision required committees, reviews, and endless discussions. One evening, Daniel sat with Lisa in a quiet observation area. They watched ships coming and going from the station. What do you think? He asked her. I think they are stuck, Lisa said. All of them. This whole civilization, nothing changes. Nothing grows. They just maintain what they have. Oh, is that bad? I do not know yet. But I noticed something else. When we solve problems, we do it differently than them. They form committees. We just try things and see what works. They plan for years. We adapt as we go. I wonder if that matters. It might, Daniel said. Before they left the station, Daniel had one more meeting. A very old alien from a species called the Krell asked to speak with him privately. The Krell looked like a walking tree with bark-like skin and branches instead of arms. You are different, the Krell said slowly. Your species. You move fast. You change fast. This may be good or bad. Time will tell. We just want to be part of the community, Daniel replied. Perhaps, but communities change when new members arrive. Sometimes in ways no one expects. Be careful, Captain Morris. The galaxy has been stable for a long time. Stability is comfortable. Change is not always welcome. The Horizon's Edge departed 3 weeks after arriving. As they traveled back toward Earth, Daniel thought about what the Krell had said. Humanity had joined a galactic civilization that did not really want to change. But humans were always changing, always pushing forward. He wondered what would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. He would find out soon enough. 5 years had passed since the Horizon's Edge returned to Earth. In that time, humanity had changed. Trade ships now traveled regularly between human space and dozens of alien worlds. Embassies were established. Alien tourists visited Earth. Human tourists visited alien planets. Everything seemed peaceful and prosperous. But Admiral Richard Cole was not fooled by the peace. He stood on the bridge of the destroyer Lightning Strike, watching sensor displays that showed 3 human cargo ships drifting in space. Their hulls were breached. Their crews were dead. Pirates had attacked them just outside human territory. Richard was 60 years old and had fought in every major conflict Earth had seen in the past 3 decades. When humanity started building a proper space navy, he was the obvious choice to lead it. Now he stared at the wreckage and felt old anger rising in his chest. How many dead? He asked quietly. 147, his executive officer replied. They never had a chance. The attackers hit them hard and fast, took everything valuable, and left. Do we know who did this? Outer Rim Raiders. The same group that has been hitting trade routes for years. They operate in the border regions where the congregation has weak presence. Richard knew about the raiders. Everyone did. They were a loose collection of pirates who preyed on shipping across multiple sectors. The congregation had known about them for decades but did little to stop them. The official policy was to file reports, increase insurance rates, and avoid traveling in dangerous areas. Get me their last known position, Richard ordered, and prepare the fleet for pursuit. His executive officer hesitated. Sir, the standard procedure is to report this to the congregation and let them handle it through proper channels. Richard turned to face him. How long do those proper channels take? 6 months to a year, typically. Sometimes longer. And by then the raiders will be long gone and more ships will be attacked. Richard shook his head. No, we do this our way. Prepare for pursuit. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships. They were smaller than most alien vessels, but faster and more maneuverable. Richard had designed them based on human naval doctrine: speed, aggression, and overwhelming firepower at the decisive point. Within 4 hours, they had tracked the raiders to a debris field in unclaimed space. The raider fleet was larger than expected. 20 vessels of various sizes, all heavily armed. They were in the middle of dividing their stolen cargo when the human ships appeared. This is Admiral Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet, Richard broadcast on all frequencies. You have attacked human vessels and killed human citizens. Surrender immediately or we will open fire. The raiders responded with weapons fire. Richard had expected that. Human ships scattered and came at the raiders from multiple angles. The battle was short and brutal. Human weapons were not more powerful than alien weapons, but human tactics were different. They coordinated perfectly, supporting each other, exploiting any weakness. Within an hour, 5 raider ships were destroyed. 7 more were disabled. The rest scattered and fled. Richard ordered his ships to secure the disabled vessels and recover any survivors. When the humans boarded the captured ships, they found the raiders were not what they expected. The crews were a mix of different species. Some were professional criminals, but many others looked desperate and hungry. They were refugees, outcasts, people with nowhere else to go. Richard interrogated the raider commander, a scarred alien who called himself Krax. Krax sat in the brig of the lightning strike. His multiple arms bound. Why attack our ships? Richard asked. Krax laughed, a harsh sound. Because you have things worth taking. Same reason we attack anyone. You know we will have to put you on trial. Trial? You mean execution? That is what the congregation does to pirates when they bother to catch us. Which they rarely do. We do things differently. If you cooperate, provide information about raider operations, you might get a reduced sentence, maybe even a chance at something better. Krax stared at him. Why would you offer that? Because I want to know why people become raiders. And because everyone deserves a second chance if they are willing to take it. Over the next few weeks, several raiders accepted the offer. They told the humans about refugee camps that received no aid, colonies that failed because the congregation could not be bothered to help, species that were denied membership for arbitrary reasons. The raiders had not started as criminals. They had become criminals because they had no other options. Senator Patricia Monroe brought this information to the Galactic congregation. Patricia was Earth's chief representative, a skilled politician who had spent 5 years learning how the congregation actually worked. She stood before the council and presented her findings. The raider problem has a solution, she said. We need to address the root causes, provide economic opportunities, create programs to help refugees and displaced populations, give people alternatives to piracy. An ancient alien named Thane from one of the founding species responded with what sounded like a sigh. Senator Monroe, we have studied this problem for centuries. The costs would be enormous. The bureaucratic restructuring would take decades, and it might not even work. The current system, while imperfect, is stable. Stable? Patricia could not keep the anger from her voice. You lose thousands of ships every year. Tens of thousands of beings die. How is that stable? It is predictable, Thane replied calmly. The losses are within acceptable parameters. Change, on the other hand, is unpredictable. Patricia realized she was fighting a losing battle. The congregation would form committees to study her proposal. Those committees would take years to produce reports. Those reports would recommend more studies. Nothing would actually change. She returned to Earth and met with the human leadership. Admiral Cole was there. So was the Secretary General and several key advisors. They are not going to help, Patricia said flatly. They are too comfortable with how things are. Then we help ourselves, Richard said. And anyone else who wants it? What do you mean? The Secretary General asked. We start our own program, the Frontier Integration Initiative. We offer raiders and refugees opportunities, jobs, education, resettlement. We do not ask the congregation for permission. We just do it. The Secretary General was quiet for a moment. That will be expensive. and it might upset the congregation. We can afford it, Patricia said. And as for upsetting the congregation, they had their chance to act. We tried doing things their way. Now we do things our way. The initiative launched 6 months later. Humanity set up processing centers in neutral space. They offered any being, regardless of species or past, a chance at a new life. The requirements were simple: no violence, willingness to work, and commitment to following the law. At first, only a few hundred beings applied. But word spread quickly. The humans actually kept their promises. They provided real jobs, not just empty words. They treated everyone fairly, regardless of where they came from. Within a year, thousands were joining the program. Within 2 years, tens of thousands. Raider attacks in human-controlled regions dropped by 70%. Former raiders now worked on human ships, in human facilities, on human colonies. Some species that had been neutral started asking humanity for trade deals and mutual defense pacts. They saw that humans actually solved problems instead of just talking about them. Ambassador Thane visited Earth to express the congregation's concerns. Patricia met with him in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. "You are overstepping your authority," Thane said. "The congregation did not approve this initiative. We did not ask for approval. We solved a problem that was killing our people. You are setting a dangerous precedent. If every species decides to act unilaterally, the congregation becomes meaningless." Patricia looked at him directly. "Maybe the congregation already is meaningless. You have the power to help billions of beings, but you choose to do nothing. So we are doing something. If that bothers you, then maybe you should try solving problems instead of maintaining the status quo." Thane left without another word, but Patricia knew he was right about one thing. Humanity had changed the rules. They had shown that you did not need permission to do the right thing, and once that idea spread, nothing would be the same. 15 years after humanity joined the galactic community, Secretary General Angela Ross sat in her office and stared at a star map. Red markers showed human territory, which had grown far beyond what anyone expected. But these were not conquests. These were voluntary associations. 73 colonies and independent systems had asked to join humanity's sphere of protection. Angela was only 45 but felt much older. Leading humanity through its rapid rise had taken everything she had. Now she faced the biggest decision of her career. A message sat on her desk marked urgent and confidential. It was from Empress Verena of the Zelthian Empire. The Zelthians were one of the congregation's founding members. Their civilization was over 10,000 years old. They had guided galactic policy for millennia, and now they were dying. Their sun was becoming unstable. Scientists predicted it would enter a deadly expansion phase within a decade. The Zelthian homeworld would become uninhabitable. 4 billion Zelthians needed to evacuate, and they needed to do it fast. Angela had watched the congregation's response. It was exactly what she expected. Committees formed. Reports were written. Debates occurred. But no actual evacuation plans materialized. The congregation was doing what it always did, talking instead of acting. Now Empress Verena was asking humanity for help. The message was simple and desperate. "Can you organize our evacuation? Can you save my people?" Angela called an emergency meeting. Admiral Cole was there, now 70 years old but still sharp. Senator Monroe attended by video link from Congregation Station. And Dr. Martin Cross, humanity's top logistics expert, sat across from Angela with a worried expression. "We cannot do this," Admiral Cole said immediately. 4 billion beings? The scale is impossible. We do not have the ships, the resources, or the authority. "We have to try," Patricia said from the screen. "If we refuse, millions will die. Maybe billions. The congregation will not act in time. We are their only hope." "What do you think, Martin?" Angela asked. Dr. Cross was a careful man who specialized in moving large populations efficiently. He had managed the refugee programs from the Frontier Integration Initiative. He studied the data on his tablet for a long moment. "Humanity alone cannot do it," he said finally, "but we could coordinate it. We could organize a coalition, get other species to contribute ships and resources. We would need to negotiate resettlement rights with dozens of worlds. It would be the largest logistics operation in galactic history." "Could it work?" Angela asked. "Maybe if everyone cooperates. If we move fast. If we get lucky." Martin looked up. "But I would not bet on it." Angela made her decision. She would not let billions die because something was difficult. That was the congregation's way of thinking. Humanity would try even if trying meant failure. She made a broadcast to the entire galaxy. Not through congregation channels, but through humanity's own network. She spoke directly to every species, every planet, every leader who would listen. "The Zelthian people face extinction," she said. "The congregation has failed to act. So humanity is asking for help. We need ships to transport refugees. We need worlds to accept them. We need resources to build new homes. This is not a political issue. This is a moral test. What kind of civilization are we if we let billions die when we have the power to save them?" The response shocked everyone. Within days, hundreds of species offered assistance. Small frontier worlds that humanity had helped through the Integration Initiative sent what little they had. Some of the old congregation members, embarrassed by the contrast between human action and their own inaction, quietly provided resources. Even some species that had been critical of humanity stepped forward. Dr. Cross set up the Zelthian Evacuation Coordination Center. He worked from a facility on Earth, but his team included beings from 40 different species. They created schedules, assigned ships, negotiated with host worlds, and solved 1,000 problems every day. The first evacuations began 6 months later. Massive transport ships arrived at the Zelthian homeworld. Families boarded with whatever they could carry. Children cried. Parents looked back at the only home they had ever known. But they were alive, and they would stay alive. Problems arose constantly. Some host worlds changed their minds about accepting refugees. Ships broke down. Supply chains failed. Cultural conflicts erupted when Zelthians arrived on worlds with very different customs. Each problem could have derailed the entire operation, but humans did what they always did. They adapted. When a host world backed out, Martin found 3 others to split the refugees. When ships broke down, Nicole Grant, now chief of engineering for the entire operation, sent repair teams that fixed them in days instead of months. When cultural conflicts arose, human mediators worked with both sides to find solutions. The Congregation Council watched from the sidelines. Ambassador Thane attended one coordination meeting. He stood in the back of the room and watched humans work. They did not form committees. They did not debate for months. They identified problems and solved them immediately. If a solution did not work, they tried something else. After the meeting, Thane approached Dr. Cross. "How do you do this?" Thane asked. "How do you make decisions so quickly?" Martin looked tired. He had not slept properly in weeks. "We try things. If they work, great. If they do not work, we try something else. We do not have time for perfect plans. We just need plans that work well enough." "But what if you make mistakes?" "We will make mistakes. We already have. But making mistakes while trying to save people is better than doing nothing and letting them die." The evacuation took 3 years. It was chaotic, imperfect, and exhausting. But when it was done, 4 billion Zelthians were safe. They were spread across 78 different worlds, but they were alive. The casualties were minimal. Infrastructure was in place. Communities were forming. Empress Verena came to Earth to thank Secretary General Ross personally. The 2 leaders met in the same office where Angela had made her decision 3 years earlier. "You saved my people," Verena said. She was old even by Zelthian standards, and the stress had aged her further. But her eyes were clear. "The congregation would have let us die. They would have written reports about our tragedy. But you acted." "We did what needed to be done," Angela replied. "That is exactly my point. You always do what needs to be done. The rest of us have forgotten how." Verena paused. "I want to propose something. The Zelthians formally request that humanity assume leadership of what remains of our territories. More than that, we propose that the congregation be restructured with humanity in a formal leadership role." Angela was quiet. She had known this was coming. The whispers had been growing louder. Humanity was already leading in everything but name. But making it official would change everything. "We never wanted to rule," Angela said softly. "I know. That is exactly why you should. Leaders who want power are dangerous. Leaders who accept power because someone must are rare and precious." Verena stood. "Think about it. But do not take too long. The galaxy needs what you have. The ability to act. The will to try. The courage to fail and try again. These are things we have lost." After Verena left, Angela stood at her window and looked at the stars. She thought about Captain Daniel Morris, who had started all of this 30 years ago, by simply trying to make first contact. She thought about Admiral Cole fighting pirates when the congregation would not. She thought about Senator Monroe refusing to accept bureaucratic paralysis as inevitable. None of them had sought power. They had just done what seemed right, and somehow that had led to this moment. Humanity standing at the center of galactic civilization, being asked to lead not through conquest but through competence. She did not know if they were ready, but she knew they could not say no. Too many beings were counting on them now. The galaxy had given humanity a throne they never sought. The only question was whether they could carry the weight of it. 25 years had passed since the horizon's edge made first contact. The old galactic congregation no longer existed. In its place was the Galactic Coordination Forum, a more flexible organization that humanity had designed during the Zelthian crisis. The forum worked better than the congregation ever had, but everyone knew why. Humans ran it. Coordinator Helen Price managed the forum from its headquarters on Station Unity, a massive facility that orbited between Earth and the major trade routes. Helen was 50 years old, efficient and fair. She made decisions quickly and expected everyone else to do the same. Some species loved her, others feared her. None could deny she got results, but success had costs. Earth's resources were stretched thin, maintaining galactic stability. Human administrators worked constantly, solving everyone's problems while their own families barely saw them. Chancellor Victor Stone, Earth's representative to the forum, felt the weight of it every day. Victor sat in his quarters late one night, reviewing reports. Trade dispute between two minor species, food shortage on a frontier world, piracy resurgence in the outer sectors. Every problem landed on human desks because everyone assumed humans would handle it. His door chimed. Helen walked in without waiting for permission. She looked as tired as he felt. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About how long we can keep doing this." Helen sat down heavily. "I processed 47 urgent requests today. 47 crises that apparently only humans can solve. Meanwhile, Earth is running deficits. Our people are exhausted, and half the galaxy seems content to let us do all the work while they criticize our methods. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we step back. Let the next crisis go unsolved. Force other species to develop their own solutions." Victor considered this. Part of him agreed completely. But another part remembered what had happened when they tried to let the congregation handle things. People died. Problems festered. Suffering spread. "We cannot," he said finally. "The systems we built depend on us. If we step back suddenly, everything collapses. Then we are trapped. We have become what we never wanted to be, the galaxy's caretakers." Before Victor could respond, alarms sounded throughout the station. Emergency protocols activated. Within minutes, they were both in the command center, surrounded by screens showing data from across the galaxy. "What is happening?" Helen demanded. A human medical officer looked up with fear in her eyes. "It is a plague. A new disease. First reported 6 hours ago on a mining colony. Now we are seeing cases on 12 different worlds across 4 sectors. Transmission rate? Extremely high. It spreads through multiple vectors. Air-water physical contact. Incubation period is short. Symptoms appear within hours. Mortality rate?" The officer hesitated. "Varies by species. Some are barely affected. Others are seeing 70% fatality rates." Victor felt cold. This was exactly the kind of crisis that could destroy civilizations. If it spread unchecked, billions could die. The kind of disaster that would make the Zelthian evacuation look simple. Helen looked at him. Their earlier conversation hung unspoken between them. This would have been the perfect time to step back, to let other species handle their own crisis. But neither of them could do it. "Activate emergency protocols," Helen ordered. "Establish the Emergency Medical Coordination Network. I want every human medical facility connected and sharing data within the hour. Get me the best doctors and researchers from every species willing to cooperate." Victor was already on the communication systems. "Attention all forum members. We are facing a pandemic threat. Quarantine protocols are now mandatory for all affected systems. Trade restrictions will be implemented to slow the spread. Research coordination will begin immediately. This is not a request. This is an emergency directive." Some species objected. Quarantines would damage their economies. Trade restrictions would cause shortages. They wanted to form committees to study the problem first. Victor overrode them all. There was no time for debate. The next weeks were chaos. Human doctors worked alongside alien researchers, sharing data at speeds that would have been impossible under the old congregation system. Cases were tracked in real time. Treatment approaches were tested, evaluated, and distributed rapidly. When something worked, everyone knew within hours. When something failed, they tried something else immediately. But the plague was smart. It adapted. Early treatments that showed promise stopped working. The death toll climbed. Some species were on the edge of collapse. Panic spread almost as fast as the disease itself. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former raider named Kree, who had joined humanity's integration initiative years ago, turned out to have natural immunity. Kree had been infected but never got sick. Human researchers studied him intensely and found the key. His immune system produced a unique antibody that the plague could not overcome. Within days, they synthesized a vaccine based on Kree's antibodies. It worked on most species, though some required modified versions. Human logistics networks distributed it across the galaxy. Ships carried vaccine doses to the most affected areas. Mobile medical teams administered treatment to billions. The plague was contained within 2 years. The final death toll was horrific, millions lost. But it could have been billions. The speed of humanity's response, the coordination they achieved, the willingness to try untested solutions, all of it made the difference between a tragedy and an apocalypse. Ambassador Kell of the Dran had led a coalition of species critical of human dominance. He had argued for years that humanity had too much power, that they made decisions without proper consultation. He had come to Station Unity to demand reforms. But after the plague, Kell met with Chancellor Stone privately. His own species had lost 2 million lives. "I came here to argue against your authority," Kell said, "to demand that humanity step back and let others lead." "I understand," Victor replied, "but I cannot make that argument anymore." "Do you know why?" "Because we saved your people." "No, because you did not have to. You could have stepped back like you wanted to. Coordinator Price told me about your conversation before the plague hit. You were discussing exactly that. But when the crisis came, you acted anyway, even though you were tired. Even though you had every reason to let someone else try. You acted because someone had to." Kell leaned forward. "That is the difference between you and the rest of us. We forgot how to lead. We forgot that leadership means doing what needs to be done whether you want to or not. The galaxy did not give you power through conspiracy. We gave it to you through our own failure. We stopped trying. So what do you want from us?" Victor asked. "I want to learn. My species. My coalition. We have been criticizing you instead of learning from you. Teach us how to act instead of debate. Show us how to solve problems instead of forming committees. We do not want to challenge your authority anymore. We want to share it. But first, we need to be capable of sharing it." After Kell left, Victor sat alone in his office. He thought about Helen's frustration and his own exhaustion. They had both wanted to step back, to force others to develop their own capabilities. Now finally, someone was asking to learn. Maybe that was the path forward, not holding power forever, but teaching others how to wield it, not ruling, but building a system that could function without them. The throne was heavy, but perhaps they did not have to carry it alone forever. He opened a new document and began drafting a proposal. The Coordination Academy, he called it. A place where any species could learn the methods that made human leadership effective. It would not solve everything overnight, but it was a start. The galaxy had given humanity the throne. Now humanity would teach others how to sit on it, because that was what leaders did. They built something that could outlast them. 40 years after first contact, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Prime Coordinator Sophie Lane stood on the observation deck of Station Unity and watched ships from hundreds of worlds come and go. Each one carried beings who had learned to solve their own problems, to coordinate their own responses, to lead their own communities. Sophie was only 38 years old, but she had been chosen to lead the Galactic Assembly for good reason. She was the first generation born after first contact, the first to grow up knowing that humanity was part of something larger. She understood what the founders had built and also saw its limitations. The Coordination Academy had been successful beyond anyone's expectations. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species had graduated. They took human methods and adapted them to their own cultures. The galaxy was more responsive, more dynamic, more alive than it had been in millennia. But Sophie knew this created a new problem. Humanity still held the center. They still coordinated major crises. They still made the final decisions when consensus could not be reached. As long as that remained true, the galaxy had not really changed. It had just found a better master. She called a summit of the major powers. Representatives from 50 species gathered in the assembly hall. Some were old friends of humanity. Others were former critics. All of them knew something had to change. Sophie stood before them and spoke plainly. We need to talk about succession, not because humanity wants to abandon you, not because we are tired, but because leadership that cannot be transferred is not really leadership. It is just dependence. The hall was silent. Everyone knew this conversation was coming, but no one wanted to start it. Humanity has occupied the central role for 4 decades, Sophie continued. We helped build institutions that work. We showed that problems can be solved. But we are not immortal. Our civilization is young. Eventually, circumstances will change. When that happens, the galaxy needs to be ready. An elderly delegate from the Zelthians stood. His name was Torin, and he had been a child during the evacuation. What are you proposing? A succession framework. A formal structure for transitioning leadership. We gradually diversify authority. We train more species in coordination and crisis management. Most importantly, we institutionalize everything we have built so it can survive without us. Ambassador Kell, now very old but still sharp, spoke up.
You are planning your own obsolescence. Yes, that is exactly what we are doing. Why?
Another delegate asked. You have earned your position. No one is demanding you step down. Sophie smiled sadly. Because we never wanted this position in the first place. We took it because circumstances demanded it, and we had the capability to help. But the goal was never to rule forever. The goal was to build something better. The proposal sparked fierce debate. Many humans resisted. After 40 years of sacrifice, the idea of voluntarily reducing their influence felt wrong. They had worked so hard, lost so much, accomplished so much. Why give it up? The answer came from an unexpected source. Elder Daniel Morris, now 92 years old and long retired, returned to public life to address the assembly. He was frail, but his mind was clear. Everyone remembered him as the captain who made first contact. His words still carried weight. I have been watching this debate, Daniel said slowly, and I think some of you have forgotten why we did any of this. We did not seek first contact to gain power. We did not solve problems to build an empire. We did it because beings needed help and we could provide it. He paused to catch his breath. If other species can now shoulder the burden, that is not failure. That is success. We did not come to the stars to rule them. We came to explore them, to learn from them, and maybe to help make them better. If we have done that, then our job is done. The hall was silent. Then slowly beings began to stand. First the Zelthians, who remembered being saved. Then former raiders who remembered being given second chances. Then species from every corner of the galaxy. They were not applauding human rule. They were acknowledging human wisdom. The succession framework was adopted with overwhelming support. Over the next decade, humanity systematically transferred responsibilities. They trained administrators from dozens of species. They established protocols for crisis response that anyone could follow. They made sure the institutions they built could function without them. Captain Christopher Blake represented this new era. He was 30 years old and commanded the Deep Space Explorer Unity's Promise. His mission was to make contact with new species at the edge of known space. But unlike Captain Morris 40 years earlier, Christopher did not represent an unknown civilization trying to find its place. He represented a galaxy that had learned to work together. When Christopher met new species, he offered partnership without demanding submission. He shared knowledge without requiring payment. He provided help without expecting control. Some species accepted immediately, attracted by what they heard about the galactic community. Others were skeptical, and Christopher respected that. The galaxy was big enough for different approaches. The true test came when a regional conflict erupted in a sector where humans had minimal presence. 2 species fought over resource rights to an asteroid belt. In the past, everyone would have immediately called for human intervention. The assumption was that only humans could mediate such disputes. But this time was different. A coalition of local species, all trained at the Coordination Academy, handled the situation themselves. They established a negotiation framework. They brought in neutral mediators. They proposed compromises that both sides could accept. Within 3 months, they had brokered a peace agreement. Sophie monitored the situation from Station Unity, ready to intervene if asked. But the call never came. The locals solved their own problem using methods they learned from humans, but adapted to their own circumstances. When the agreement was signed, Sophie felt something she had not expected. Relief. "We did it," she said to Chancellor Stone, who was visiting from Earth. Victor, now in his 70s, smiled. "We taught them to fish instead of fishing for them." Exactly. Leadership is not about being needed forever. It is about making yourself unnecessary. More successes followed. Species that had been passive for thousands of years started taking initiative. Problems were solved locally before they became galactic crises. The coordination networks that humans built remained, but they were operated by beings from hundreds of worlds working together. Humanity was still important, still respected, still influential, but they were no longer indispensable. And that, Sophie realized, was exactly how it should be. 50 years after first contact, Elder Daniel Morris passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 102 years old and had lived to see everything he started reach fruition. His funeral was attended by representatives from over 500 species. They came from every corner of the galaxy to honor the man who had started humanity's journey to the stars. Prime Coordinator Lane gave the eulogy. She stood before the assembled masses and spoke about a captain who had simply done his job. Daniel Morris had not sought glory or power. He had not tried to conquer or dominate. He had just made first contact with an open mind and a generous heart. Everything that followed came from that simple beginning. The galaxy gave humanity the throne, Sophie said, not through conquest, not through manipulation, but through the simple act of showing up when others would not. Captain Morris showed up. Admiral Cole showed up. Senator Monroe showed up. Every human who worked to make the galaxy better showed up. They proved that leadership is not about power or ambition. It is about service, sacrifice, and the courage to try. She paused and looked out at the crowd. Other species are learning that lesson now, and the galaxy is better for it. Humanity did not conquer the stars. We taught the stars to save themselves, and perhaps that is the truest form of leadership, not claiming the throne, but making sure the throne is not needed at all. As Daniel Morris was laid to rest, thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds fired salutes. The gesture had originated with human military tradition, but was now adopted across the galaxy. It was a small symbol of how much had changed. Later that night, Sophie stood alone on the observation deck, where she had begun her term as Prime Coordinator. She watched the stars and thought about everything humanity had accomplished. They had not set out to rule the galaxy. They had just tried to help. Somehow that had been enough. The throne remained. It always would. Someone would always need to coordinate, to lead, to make hard decisions. But now it was a throne that many could share, a burden that many could carry. Humanity had shown the way, but the path forward belonged to everyone. That had always been the goal. Not to rule, but to teach. Not to dominate, but to inspire. Not to hold power forever, but to use it well while it was needed and then pass it on. The galaxy had given humanity the throne, and humanity in turn had given it back to the galaxy, better, stronger, and ready to stand on its own. That was the real victory. That was what made it all worthwhile. 75 years after the horizon's edge made first contact, the galaxy had become something that would have been unrecognizable to those early pioneers. Captain Elizabeth Carter sat in the command chair of the exploration vessel New Dawn and studied the star charts displayed before her. She was 32 years old, born on a colony world that had not even existed when humanity first joined the galactic community. Elizabeth represented a new generation. To her, aliens were not strange or exotic. They were colleagues, friends, neighbors. She had grown up speaking 3 alien languages alongside English. Her crew included beings from 12 different species, and she did not think twice about it. This was just how things were. The New Dawn was on a 5-year mission to explore the galactic edge, making contact with isolated civilizations that had not yet joined the broader community. It was important work, but it was no longer unique. Dozens of ships from dozens of species were doing the same thing. Humanity no longer monopolized exploration or first contact. They had taught others, and others had learned. Elizabeth received a message from Earth that made her pause. Former Prime Coordinator Sophie Lane had died at age 83. The woman who had overseen humanity's gradual transition from galactic leadership to partnership was gone. Elizabeth had never met Sophie, but she knew her legacy. The galaxy worked because Sophie had made sure it could work without depending on any single species. She called her crew together in the common area and shared the news. Her first officer, a Vorath named Quinn, bowed his head in respect. Quinn was from the same species that had escorted Captain Morris to the first meeting with the congregation all those decades ago. "My grandfather told me about the early days," Quinn said quietly. "He said humans were strange. They moved too fast, changed too quickly, made decisions without proper consideration. But they also got things done. They turned a stagnant galaxy into a living one. Do you think we are still like that?" Elizabeth asked. "Strange and fast and impulsive?" Quinn considered this. "Yes, but now we all are. You taught us to be that way, to try things instead of endlessly planning, to adapt instead of rigidly following old patterns. My people used to think change was dangerous. Now we embrace it. That is humanity's real gift to the galaxy." The New Dawn continued its mission. They made contact with a species called the Marini, who had achieved basic space travel but had not ventured far from their homeworld. The Marini were cautious and deeply traditional. They had watched the stars for centuries but feared what they might find there. Elizabeth met with the Marini leadership on their orbital station. She brought Quinn and several other crew members to show the diversity of the galactic community. The Marini leader, whose name translated to wind through grass, studied them with multiple eyes. "You come from many worlds," Wind Through Grass observed. "Yet you work together. How is this possible? We have read your histories. We know there have been conflicts." "There have been conflicts," Elizabeth agreed. "There still are sometimes. But we learned that working together brings more benefits than working alone. The galaxy is big enough for everyone. What if we join you and lose ourselves? What if our culture, our traditions, our identity dissolves into this larger whole?" It was Quinn who answered. "My species feared the same thing. We thought contact with others would erase who we were. But the opposite happened. Engaging with the galaxy helped us understand ourselves better. We kept what was valuable and changed what was not. You will not lose your identity. You will discover new aspects of it." The Marini decided to join the galactic community, but on their own terms and at their own pace. Elizabeth spent 3 months helping them establish connections and understand the systems that governed interspecies relations. She did not push. She did not demand. She simply made herself available and let them choose their own path. Before leaving, Wind Through Grass asked Elizabeth a question. "I have studied human history. You came to the galaxy seeking friendship and knowledge, but you ended up leading for decades. Now you have stepped back. Why?" Elizabeth thought carefully about her answer. "Because we never wanted to lead forever. We led because someone needed to and we were capable. But real leadership is not about holding power. It is about using power well and then sharing it. My ancestors understood that. They built systems that could work without them, then stepped aside so others could learn to lead too. That is wisdom," Wind Through Grass said. "Most species seek power and then cling to it. Humans sought service and then gave away authority. This is remarkable." "It is not remarkable," Elizabeth replied. "It is just practical. Power that cannot be shared becomes tyranny. Leadership that cannot be transferred becomes dependence. Our goal was never dominance. It was partnership." As the New Dawn departed Marini space, Elizabeth reflected on the conversation. She had been born into a galaxy where humans were already transitioning away from central authority. She had never experienced the burden that Captain Morris or Coordinator Lane or Chancellor Stone had carried, but she understood their choices better now. Back on Earth, a memorial service was held for Sophie Lane. Thousands attended in person. Millions more participated by hologram from across the galaxy. The speakers included former raiders who Sophie had helped integrate, diplomats from species she had mentored, and ordinary beings whose lives had been touched by her work. The final speaker was the current Prime Coordinator, a being named Thrace from a species called the Keldon. Thrace had graduated from the Coordination Academy 30 years ago and had risen through merit and competence. He was the first non-human to hold the position, a milestone that everyone recognized as significant. "Sophie Lane taught me that leadership is not birthright or destiny," Thrace said. "It is responsibility. When she trained me, she did not teach me to follow human methods blindly. She taught me to understand the principles behind those methods and adapt them to my own context. She did not want to create copies of humans. She wanted to create leaders who could think for themselves." He paused and looked out at the crowd. Humanity never sought the throne. They took it because circumstances demanded action, and they were capable of providing it. But they always knew the throne was temporary. They built a galaxy that could govern itself, solve its own problems, face its own challenges. That is their true legacy. Not the decisions they made, but the capacity they built in all of us. After the service, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered informally. They shared stories about how humanity had influenced their own civilizations. The Zelthians talked about learning to adapt during crisis. The Vorath discussed embracing change instead of fearing it. Former raiders spoke about second chances and redemption. Each story was different, but the theme was the same. Humanity had shown them what was possible. Ambassador Kell, impossibly old but still alive, sat with a group of younger diplomats and told them about the early days. He described meeting Captain Morris, watching humanity respond to the raider problem, seeing them coordinate the Zelthian evacuation. The young diplomats listened with fascination. To them, these were ancient history. But to Kell, it felt like yesterday. What was the most important thing they did? One young diplomat asked. Kell thought for a long moment. They showed up. That sounds simple, but it was everything. When there was a problem, they showed up to solve it. When someone needed help, they showed up to provide it. When the galaxy was stagnant, they showed up to shake things loose. And when we finally learned to show up for ourselves, they stepped back gracefully. That combination of action and humility is rare. Elizabeth Carter received a message several months later. The Marini had established formal relations with a dozen neighboring species. They were building their own version of the Coordination Academy to train their people in diplomacy and crisis management. They wanted to thank Elizabeth for introducing them to the galaxy, but more importantly, they wanted to share what they were learning. She read the message and smiled. This was how it was supposed to work. Not one species leading forever, but everyone contributing what they could. Not dependence, but mutual support. Not hierarchy, but partnership. The galaxy had given humanity the throne, but humanity had transformed it into something better. Not a throne at all, but a round table where everyone had a seat, where decisions were made together, where responsibility was shared, where leadership was not about power, but about service. Captain Morris would have been proud. Admiral Cole would have approved. Senator Monroe would have smiled. Coordinator Lane would have nodded in satisfaction. They had set out to explore the stars and ended up teaching the galaxy how to govern itself. The throne had never been the goal. The goal was always partnership, cooperation, and the belief that different beings working together could accomplish more than any species alone. Humanity had proven that belief true, and in proving it, they had given the galaxy its greatest gift. Not leadership, but the capacity for all beings to lead themselves. That was the real story. Not conquest or domination. Not even benevolent rule. Just a species that showed up when needed, did what had to be done, and then gracefully stepped aside when others were ready to carry the burden. That was enough. That was everything. That was what it meant to be worthy of the throne that no one had sought, but